This is the Adoptive Mom Podcast. Adoption may look different for each family, but we need solidarity from other crazy people who took this leap. And that is what we do here. We encourage, we build up, we share the wins and losses. We lean on each other, and we get through this together. Thanks for joining us. Hey everyone, this is Season 3, Episode 5 of the Adoptive Mom Podcast, and I am Alex Fitton, your host. Y'all, we've been back for 5 whole weeks now, and as always, I am humbled beyond measure to hear how this little podcast is touching people's lives that I don't even know. It brings me so much joy to know that these amazing guests that I bring on the show can impact you guys' lives. If this is true of you, will you take a minute to leave a review on iTunes? It'll only take a second, I promise. And you can even do it while you listen, like right now. You can do it right now. Today, however, I'm going to introduce you guys to Christine Bauer. If you've been a listener for a while, you'll remember back in Season 2 when we were plugging Christine's book, Those 3 Words, in honor of Birth Mother's Day. I'm so excited that I finally get to air her interview now. I love when I get to showcase birth mother stuff and how we as adoptive parents can better include that third important piece of the adoption triad. We talked about her story and her passion to bring awareness for birth mothers and to stifle that stigma that often surrounds this important decision. So we'll get to Christine in just a minute, but I want to remind y'all to go and sign up for my weekly email at theadoptivemompodcast.com/email. It doesn't get more simple than that. And that's another thing that you guys can do right now. This will bring you guys updates, resources, and of course the weekly episodes right into your inbox every Monday morning. It's like a hello from me to start off your week. And like I said, do it right now. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and resources mentioned in this episode, including Christine's amazing book. With all of that said, let's head over to my interview with Christine Bauer. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to Christine Bauer. I'm so excited to chat with you because I've been plugging your book for the end part of Season 2, and now I get to interview you for Season 3, which is so fun. So how is it going? How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
I love telling my story and talking about the gift of adoption.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear it because I think that your story is so powerful and it's so important for all women who are choosing adoption for their child to know that this is we're done, or we should be done with the age where that's something that needs to be swept under the rug. And so I love hearing empowered voices who are like, here's my story. Let's talk about it. So on that note, let's talk about it. Just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Well, I am first and foremost a proud and happy mom and grandma. I have 3 children, Katie, whom I placed for adoption and grew up with a lovely family. And I feel like we're just all one big happy family. And Katie's 33. And then I have a son, Dylan, who's 21, and a son, Jared, who's 18. And then I have a granddaughter who's 3 and another grandchild on the way. And then I also have a family of the canine variety. I have a dog and 2 granddogs. So they're also an important part of the family. But no, I'm really, really blessed. I'm blessed. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so aside from being a writer, is that something that you've been doing for a long time, or is that like a side gig, or what part of your life is that?
Yeah, I have always been a writer as far as, I have always loved reading and writing in books. This is my first book I've ever published, but I have been writing off and on my whole life. I worked for my student newspaper. I worked for my college newspaper. And I majored in communications, and so my first job out of college was as a writer for a corporate publication, and then I've been doing marketing and communications for almost 30 years now. So it's just in my blood. It's what I do, and actually I'm taking a break from kind of the corporate marketing thing, and just taking a couple months to focus on my book and promoting my book and doing some more writing. So. I'm excited.
So fun. Girl, yeah. I was a comm major too, so solidarity there. And I'm at my core, I'm a writer, but I had a blog and then people stopped reading those. So I transferred over to podcasts.
Good for you. Yeah.
But that's so
You're doing
exciting. I love hearing other comm majors. It's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that, like I said, for those of you who have not listened to when I've been plugging her book like crazy because it's so important and awesome, she wrote a book. I mean, there's a newsflash for you, but your book is about your story of being a birth mom and placing your child for adoption. And you hinted at that earlier when you talked about your daughter, Katie. So what is that? What is that whole story? Start at the beginning and just tell us all about it.
Well, I've discovered I was pregnant when I was 18 years old and just weeks into my freshman year of college. And I was devastated. I had been using birth control and, doesn't always work. So I was just, like I said, I just was kind of sideswiped by it all. And I just felt I was not ready to be a mom at 18. I emotionally was not in a place to be a good mom. And so I really struggled with my decision. I did consider all my options, and I did consider abortion. And I'm glad that I didn't take that road, but I totally support the right to choose. So anyway, it was just that it was an agonizing decision. It was really hard. And I ended up, going the adoption route and the open adoption. So I knew Katie's parents and got to know them. And so went through with the adoption and just could not have been more blessed with finding amazing parents for my daughter. And she's 33 now, and I was actually there for the birth of my granddaughter. So, I just feel like it was all meant to be, and it turned out great. But that doesn't mean it wasn't hard. It was hard. It was really hard. The hardest thing I've ever done is hand my newborn child over. But they are beautiful, wonderful parents, and Katie had a good life.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of the aspects here. So you talked about considering all of your options, and I've told you, but I've talked to several birth moms throughout the podcast's life, and that's something that resonates with every single one of them. And even if they're completely pro-life before becoming pregnant, every single one still considers abortion. Why do you think that is? That even if it goes against your morals, even if it's something you would have, quote, never considered before it actually happened to you, why do you think that still goes through your mind? Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that was the reaction from people. A monumental thing to be carrying, being a potential mother. Mm-hmm. And I think it crosses everybody's mind because it's just like, what is the right thing to do and what is the right thing for me? A lot of people just could not go through with adoption because it's really, really hard. And then other people I know couldn't go through with having an abortion just because of their belief system and kind of what's happening in their life at that time. And again, I just don't think you ever know what you will really do until you're in that situation. So for people to say, I would do this or do that, right. It's not necessarily what you actually would do. And that's why I really struggle with other people, particularly men, trying to have a say in a woman's right to choose or reproductive health overall. I just think it's such a personal decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I apologize. I'll cut this part out. My son just came in the room, so I was trying to get him out. He's 3, so doesn't take naps anymore, and it kind of cramps my recording style sometimes. Yeah. I'm writing down the time so I can cut this part out of the podcast.
I love it.
Yeah. He's a mess, but I love him. Okay. So yeah, absolutely. And talking to women who did go that route and who didn't and who chose abortion, it has been fascinating to me because you're right. I think that as someone who's never been in that situation, I want to say, oh, absolutely not. I would never, but that's not what happens. As humans, our fight or flight or just whatever survival responses come into play. And there's no way we can say with definite accuracy what we would do or what we would choose or whatever else. And that's part of what I strive to do on this podcast is, as someone who's just simply an ally or advocate, to never judge someone by what decision they make, because in those situations, we don't know. And you didn't know when you were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So fast forward, at what point in your pregnancy did you choose adoption?
I was not that far into my pregnancy. I had just found out, and I don't want to give too much away from my book.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it was within the first 2 months. Okay. And
that's early.
I knew, yep. And I knew that, I decided that terminating the pregnancy wasn't what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. And again, I just, I just was not ready to be a mom. And so it was like, okay, I think I can go down this route and have, give this gift of adoption and make a family complete.
Right.
And so I decided pretty early on. But throughout the entire pregnancy, I would go back and forth, with, can I really do this? Is this really the right thing? Maybe I can be a good mom. It's until the very end, you just don't know if you'll be able to do it.
Right. So let's talk some about the stigma back then. Mm-hmm. And I know, you said your daughter's in her 30s now, and so that was obviously a little while ago. Yep. I know that adoption was, kind of the culture around having a baby anyway was like within marriage, abortion that you just don't talk about, or adoption that you also just don't talk about. So what was kind of the culture, the air around this decision for you and around this time?
Yeah. It was definitely not accepted like it is now to be a single mom. For one thing, so that is one, there was that stigma of, if I would, keep the baby, there's this single mom thing. And I grew up Catholic. So that's another factor that was weighing in. Yeah. And I was from a small town, and, everybody knows everybody's business kind of thing. So, I think there were a lot of sensitivities that way. But, it just wasn't, people didn't talk about issues and personal things as much as they do now. And so I did feel like there was this, I really couldn't talk about it. I didn't feel comfortable talking about it. And I think that just kind of goes with the times. I have several good friends who are adopted, and I think back to their moms and, what they went through. It was even, the further back you go, the worse it was as far as this stigma, or you're a bad person, or, there was this kind of shame. And so, I'm glad to see that things are continually progressing, and that we are more compassionate and understanding and accepting of people, whether they decide to be a single mom or if they place their baby for adoption. It just seems that there's more acceptance and compassion around that.
Yeah. And even within, you mentioned that you grew up Catholic, and even within the Christian community, I feel like that is progressing as well, to honor someone's choice and to not just have it, if it doesn't fit in this box, then we're not going to support you. Because I think that's something that even back Sarah Avery, what she said, and I love quoting this, she said, abortion clinics tell women, you can come here and it'll be okay. We'll take care of you and it'll be okay. And that's what the church should be saying. That no matter what your choice, the church should be saying, we will support you if you decide to be a single mom, if you decide to put your baby up for adoption, that you're still an equal part in this transaction here. Even if you leave the hospital without a child, that doesn't make you just the vessel,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So, okay. So I know that you don't want to give away too much from your book,
Yep.
which we're going to talk
Yep.
about in a little bit, but so you're in the hospital, and where was there ever a moment where you teetered on that decision? I know that there's, like I said, I'm not sure what it was back then, but I know that right now, in this day and age, there's like a 10-day grace period where you could have changed your mind. You obviously didn't, but was there ever a time when you teetered on that decision?
Yeah, when I was laying in the hospital bed and she was down the hall and I was laying there feeling empty and alone, and I knew she was down the hall, and I kept saying, don't go down there, and don't go pick her up and run out the door. So it was hard, and actually, in my situation, and I don't know what the laws are now, I had a 6-month time that I could have changed my mind.
Wow.
Which is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I felt those, in those really first early days and weeks that I would think about it, but then once I got home and back to college, and I kind of just was like, that was the past. I'm just moving forward. That helped, but absolutely, I did have moments where I was longing for her.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to talk about some post-birth stuff, but let's back up a little bit. So birth dad, what kind of factor was that? I know that there are so many different ways that birth dads, what they say, some of them really push for abortion. Some of them don't support adoption. They want you to raise the baby and them to just kind of be in the wings for when they feel like it. What was your situation?
Yeah. Katie's birth father was wonderful. He was really supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And so, I can't say enough good things about that. He did at one point, want to get married, and I just didn't feel that was right for us, and for me. And I think, at times, that was painful, and I did, sure, that flashed in my mind a few times, but he was extremely supportive. So I give him a lot of credit for that and appreciation.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that story is so rare. And so that's awesome. Is he still in her life like you are?
He is not. And, hopefully someday they will connect. It's more complicated now because my daughter actually lives in New Zealand, and so she's far away. Yeah. And that could happen someday.
Okay.
Good thing for seeing Skype or
yeah. I imagine FaceTime is a big part of your life.
Yeah, or FaceTime. FaceTime is a huge part of my life. Yes.
That's awesome. So, okay. So back to, you've had the baby. You've mostly decided that that you're following through. And I know that the selection of her parents was part of your book. And so you'll have to read to get into that. Yeah. But, whenever I talk to birth moms, it's interesting because everyone's story is so different, but there are some key elements that every single one says. And one of them is that weird feeling that when you leave that hospital, you're a parent, kind of, you're postpartum, kind of, and you're normal, kind of. But nothing is full, and you don't really, everyone sees you as the same person. You went back to school, you worked, you did what you do, but you're a completely different person. So talk to us about that.
Gosh, I'm kind of getting teary-eyed when you're at it.
I know, I always do when I hear these stories.
That question. Yeah. In hindsight, it's like, I wish I would have talked about it more. I wish I would have been more open about it, but it's hard to do. Because on the outside, you don't look any different to people. By the time I got back to school or even, a couple months after having Katie, people didn't know I had a baby, and so you're carrying this inside of you, but you're not talking about it, but you're completely transformed as a person. And I went back to school, and I just, didn't tell very many people at all. But I was carrying this big thing with me all the time. And so I think that in some ways it all ended up coming out then when I got pregnant with my first son. This pregnancy just brought up all these buried emotions. I just spent a lot of time grieving during my second pregnancy, because it just brought up so much emotion from when I had Katie that I just had kind of buried and hadn't dealt with. And so it was this big, not only emotional but physical thing I could feel. It was pretty intense. So that's part of why, too, the book has been so cathartic, and, sharing the story, even though it's really personal, it's been really positive for me. And it's been really positive, too, just to get response from people on their experiences with adoption.
Yeah. You talked about, some of these buried emotions, and I think that is completely normal in a situation like that. What were you supposed to do, especially again back in the day when you gave birth to her, when there wasn't a lot of support, or there weren't a lot of options for you to have outlets to talk about this. But I'm glad you brought up your first son. At what age did you tell your sons about this?
They were 4 and 7 when when Katie came back into our life. And that's the beauty of children, is they are so accepting and loving.
Yeah.
I told them they had a sister, and they're like, "Oh, that is so cool." And so they just welcomed her with open arms. And, it wasn't until years later when they kind of figured out, that, they realized I hadn't always had a relationship just with their father, that I'd had a relationship with somebody else. And, but overall it was just, acceptance and love, and one more person in the family.
I love that. Were you, and this is a hard question, I know it is, but you talked about some of those emotions. Was guilt one of them with when you had your first child? Your first son.
Yeah. That was part of it. And, I did go to counseling then, and worked with somebody. It was kind of like I had been through all the stages of grief except acceptance, and so really it was more about accepting that, I did this. It was okay. It was good. I am good, and I can move forward now.
Yeah, I think that's so important. But were you afraid ever that Katie would not understand, that she would see these other kids that you did keep, so to speak? I feel like that's a really inappropriate word. I'm not really sure how else to say it, but that you chose to parent, and not her. Was there ever fear on your part?
No, not so much fear. More just I hope she would. I hope she would understand. But there's 12 years. I think there's 12 years difference. And that's quite a few years that that I was able to mature and become a woman ready to raise children. So I think that she probably understood that. We did talk. She and I did talk about it and why. And but Katie is just an amazing young lady, and she had an amazing parents. And I think she was raised with the knowledge from the very beginning that she had two mamas, that she didn't grow in Cindy's tummy. She grew in Chrissy's tummy, and she had an older brother who was also adopted. So it was just part of their life, that's how the families came together,
Yeah.
So I think that, I hope that made it easier for her to understand.
I think that's so wonderful. We talked earlier about things that, everyone's story is different, but things that come up in everyone's story. And in all of the healthy adoption stories, that's the main thing that always comes up is when a child knows always that adoption was a part of their story instead of it being thrown on them at an older age. And so I think that that's great that she knew that, and that she knew that it was out of love that you made that decision, and that she could ask you those questions or have the freedom to ask her mom those questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Dennis and Cindy made it a healthy thing. It was, just how their family came together. And then they ended up having, Dennis and Cindy had 2 biological children after they adopted Katie. After trying for many, many years, they got pregnant right after adopting Katie. So, so anyway, they have a happy family, and I think that, you're right. It's good to talk about, and does just make it more okay and acceptable. And this is just how our family came together.
Yeah. So, and I apologize at the beginning. You're married right now or no?
Well, I am no longer married.
Okay. I just had to figure. Okay. So when you met your boy's father, was that something that came up early on, or did you wait a little bit?
Yeah, you know what? I did tell him right away, within like the first 3 dates, I think, because it was such a big part of my life. And now, and then I was finally starting to talk about it more, and it was important. I felt it was important that he know that.
Yeah. And what was his reaction?
Oh, he was great. He thought it was cool, and was really supportive.
That's awesome. I know that's not always the case for some people. And so, I think that there's fear on some birth mothers' part surrounding that, just that it's not going to be accepted that they're just going to be judged again. And so I love hearing when men can be mature about this kind of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. It is a maturity thing, and being open and accepting.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's move on to what you've done with this life story of yours. How long ago did you decide to write a book about this?
I started writing this book a very long time ago. Well, and I have been saying really almost 30 years, because I kept a journal when I was pregnant with Katie, and I kept a journal off and on through my kids' early years as well. So I had so much documented that I had a lot to draw on, and, to be able to include journal entries and letters in my book helped. But that was really when the writing started, I feel like, when I was journaling.
Yeah.
And then I took different classes, writing classes, and I literally, it was like 25 plus years ago that I went to a writing workshop and had a draft. Then I'd get busy. Well, then I had kids. You know how that is.
Yes.
I had my boys and was really busy, and I had a career. So I'd work on it off and on when I could. And then I really finished it 10 years ago, but I kept, and then I'd tried to get a literary agent, and really tried to pursue the traditional publishing route. Mm-hmm. And it is very difficult. Yeah. And I had many, many rejections. But there was this part of me, it was like, I don't want to self-publish. I want to go traditional. And then finally I just decided, a couple years ago, I have to do this, and I'm self-publishing. So I was introduced to Wise Ink Publishing, and they were just great partners on this journey of, helping with edits and getting a book designer and the whole printing process and helping get it up for sale. So it's been a great journey. And I'm glad it's finally published.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, I mean, just in the all the shallow aspects of the book, the cover design is beautiful, and I think that that's
Well,
great
thank
because
you.
reaching to a younger audience. I mean, I'm sorry, an audience that runs the gamut in ages, but specifically,
Mhm.
a younger audience in respect to when you actually wrote and finished the book. I
Mhm.
think that it really grabs attention and it looks like something you want to read. And I just think, I mean, like I said, that's totally like the shallow aspects of the book. Oh, yeah, we're doing a video chat and she's holding it up right now. It's really cool looking and
Thank
it's,
you.
yeah. And it's a
No,
really,
I appreciate that, and that's really important. And I've heard that from so many people. And because I'm in marketing as a profession, and so I know that good design is important. And yeah, that was a fun aspect of it, was picking the cover and working with the designer to tweak it. And that's the beauty of self-publishing as well, is that you have the opportunity to have that input, and you
mm-hmm.
do have a say in many, many things, and really everything. I mean, you are the ultimate decision maker, where if you go the traditional publishing route, you do not have that much say in all of, in those different aspects like design and some of the editing. So that was really fun. It's been fun.
Yeah. So, um, did you involve Katie in your writing or in the decision to publish?
She has known all along that I've been working on a book,
Mm-hmm.
and she has not yet read it. She started it a couple times, but she says she cries too much. And she's pregnant right now, too. So I said, you don't have to read it for 10 years or ever. I'm sure she will someday. But I did get her other mother, Cindy, to read it. I actually had Cindy read it 2 different times. Once early on, when the manuscript was getting close to final, and then before it went to the printer, because I wanted to make sure she was comfortable with it, and if she thought Katie would be comfortable with it. And Cindy gave it a 2 thumbs up. So that was really comforting to me, and I really appreciated that. And I wanted to make sure I had all the, my memory was serving me
Yeah.
correctly as far as timeline and people and some of those things. So that was, and she gave me she even wrote a review for me. I need to post that. I don't know that I have. Anyway, that meant the world to me.
Yeah. That's like the review that you want, right?
Yeah, yeah, it
um,
is. You're right. It absolutely is.
that's so cool. And so, okay, what is your favorite chapter of the book without going into too much detail? Just like the not cliff notes version. What am I trying to say? Like just the, one sentence, what the chapter is about. And then also what was the hardest chapter for you?
Oh, my favorite. Oh, my favorite chapter is when Katie came and we reconnected for the first time, and my boys were here, and then the letters she wrote me after our first visit. And the hardest one would be where I held her as a baby and told her I loved her and that I would see her again someday, but I had to say goodbye for now. So those are the 2.
Those are, I can see why those would be the 2.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so when we were talking, or we're moving into closing questions, but you brought up Cindy, and I think that one of the most important conversations that I have with birth moms is just this fear stigma that adoptive moms have of you guys, to be quite frank. And as an adoptive mom myself, it's so hard for me to walk that fence between adamantly being like, no, we shouldn't be afraid, guys, and yet on the inside being afraid.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who, I'm sure, I mean, you're not stupid. I'm sure you knew that there was fear involved, or that there could be, or that was something you were afraid of, as being like, hey, I'm not trying to take your kid, but I still want to be there. So
Sure.
Was that hard for you? And then how did Cindy overcome that, or how did she get there?
Yeah, they were, I just can't say enough good things about them. They were so secure in how they, in their love for Katie, that they weren't threatened by me. They were open enough that they left it up to me. I mean, I could go and meet Katie and hang out with Katie anytime I want. They left that door open. I decided that I didn't want to do that, that it would be best if Katie decided when she wanted to meet me. And Cindy and Dennis had also gone through. Dennis is Katie's dad, and he's awesome. Dennis and Cindy. Their older son had been adopted as well, and they had, it was open, and they had some interaction with the birth mom. So they had experience with that. And I've never really talked to Cindy about that maybe there was this, oh my gosh, what if she comes back and is here all the time or something? But I just felt that their family, that was their family, and they deserve to be a family and love each other, and just know that I was glad that I helped make that happen. But I didn't want to interfere in Katie's life. I mean, I think it's hard enough being a kid, and especially a teenage girl, that I didn't want to put that burden on her that, that I'm going to come into your life. So I hope that answers that the right way. I just think, the whole process and the whole, Katie has two moms, and I'm okay with that. That helped make it all so good and easy.
Yeah, and I want to highlight a couple of things that you said. So I love that you said that they were so secure in their love for her, and that's them making themselves not the main characters in her story, which I think is so cool, because it wasn't about them, and they recognized that. And then on your side, you recognize that while your story is your story, and that's what the book is about, her story is not your story. It's not about you, and that you're not the main character there. And so all of you loved her so much that you wanted the best thing for her. And I think that is so incredibly selfless, and I wish that was the case for so many, but it's not. I've talked to so many moms who even have great birth moms, but they're just afraid. It's kind of that, you hold on to something so tightly and you feel like that's going to keep it from getting away, but it's the opposite.
Yeah. That was a fabulous summation. Thank you.
But I'm just so inspired by it, because that's not the case for so many people. Yeah. And even, I mean, again, I keep going back that she's in her 30s now. That was over 30 years ago. And those kind of stories were so much more rare. Mm-hmm. Like I said, adoption, abortion, just anything outside of like, two married people having a kid and raising that kid, which is not talked about. And for that to be so healthy back then is amazing. And I love hearing that.
Thank you. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, that is a good description of it. That is a very healthy relationship, and it was all along. And, I'm really blessed, that they are so wonderful. And you're right, it was and is all about our daughter. She's the one. She's the star.
That's cool. What does she call you, by the way?
Sometimes she calls me Mom. Sometimes she calls me Chrissy.
Chrissy, that's like a cute mom nickname.
Yeah.
I like it.
And sometimes, and when we reconnected, and sometimes I sign my letters Chrissy Mom, or just Mom, but yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, are you good to move into some of these closing questions?
Sure. Yep.
Awesome. So, what do you wish that someone had told you at the beginning of this journey? So, I mean, you're freshly pregnant and you don't even really know what you're going to decide. What do you wish that someone had told you?
Have faith, and it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be.
That's so powerful, because it's going to be okay seems cliche, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to hear. And I imagine it would have been hard for you to believe it, but looking back now, that to be true.
Yes, and it's better than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah,
it really is. It really is.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is something you wish you had done differently along the journey at any point?
I wish I had started talking about it a lot sooner than 33 years later. Especially back when I was in college, and even early, even though my ex-husband now, but husband then, I mean, um, we didn't really talk about it with his family. My family didn't even talk about it that much. I mean, with my mother and my sister, who were really instrumental in how everything played out and getting me connected with Dennis and Cindy, uh, you know, um, besides my sister, and we didn't talk about it as a family as a whole, like with my dad and my brothers. We really didn't talk about it that much. And my brother recently read the book, and he was so cute because he was like, I feel so bad. I didn't do more. I didn't do more. And I said, well, don't feel bad, because I didn't, it wasn't just you. It was all of us that didn't talk about it. And I think it was part of just the time we were living in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I that is the biggest thing I would have done differently, is just talk more about it, and be proud of it, and happy that I was able to bring this beautiful person into the world, and help this family that I love very much.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so what is the way that your tribe supported you at that time?
So going through the whole process, pregnancy, childbirth, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sister was amazing. She asked me to come live with her, and so I lived with her, and was her tag along for many months. And she was actually my birth coach. So she was in the room when Katie was born. She connected the dots to me meeting Dennis and Cindy and placing my baby with Dennis and Cindy. And the story, it still sometimes just boggles my mind that it worked out so beautifully, and how all these stars aligned, that we all connected. I don't know if you remember from the book, the Proudies, the couple. So there were a couple who my sister knew that knew Dennis and Cindy, and it's how we all got together. It just feels like it was all meant to be. And I am, although I'm not particularly religious, I am very, very spiritual, and I believe in a higher power. And I do think that somebody had a hand in all this, helped it along. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So the other less fun side of that question is, what is a way that you felt unsupported or misunderstood?
I think when, there were times when I'd tell people that, I placed a baby for adoption, and I would feel like maybe they didn't think I was a loving enough person or a caring enough person. But, you have to be loving and caring to entrust your baby with somebody else when you're not ready to be a mother. So I think there is that misunderstanding of, why would you do that?
Yeah. Or just, and I'm not sure that this is part of your story, but I imagine it is, just that you don't fit the typical stereotype of a birth mom. And I imagine that kind of blew people's minds sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some ways that you would encourage women on both sides of of their adoption story? So women that are pregnant and don't know what to do, and then also separately women who are on the other side and maybe aren't talking about it, or don't know, don't know who to turn to or what to do, aside from me reading your book, which is an obvious good thing that people should do.
I think if you're facing an unplanned pregnancy, just really taking time to think about yourself and your future and what you want and your baby's future if you choose to continue. And really you have to just do some soul searching. And I think talking to other moms on both sides of the aisle is probably a good thing. Mm-hmm. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And it isn't anything to be ashamed of or to be hard on yourself about. It happens a lot. It happens all the time. And and you're good. And remember that. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such good advice for anyone who's facing a hard situation where they have to make a decision for themselves, and maybe women who don't feel like that decision is theirs because of their parents or because of a birth dad or something like that, that decision is yours, and that you need to be kind to yourself in that decision. I think that is so, so, so powerful. Okay, and then here's a wild card question for you, but how do you celebrate Birth Mother's Day every year?
You know what? I didn't even know about Birth Mother's Day until this year. I know. So I've been missing out all these years.
Yeah, girl, you could have been getting presents all this time.
I know. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. Somebody that came up in some interview, somebody asked me about Mother's Day. And for years, before I had my boys, in these 12 years where I was really a mom, but nobody recognized it. It was Mother's Day. They were hard.
Gosh,
I
imagine.
So I'm really happy to hear that there is a Birth Mother's Day, and absolutely it should be celebrated.
Yeah. Well, and just as an adoptive mom, Mother's Day can tend to be hard. So I had 2 adoptions, one from birth and one when he was older and remembers everything. And so Mother's Day is particularly hard because of him, because he would often act out. He would have a lot of trauma relapses on that day. And so it was often a really bad day for me as an adoptive mom. And so I think that adoptive moms with children who remember and birth moms, they kind of share that it's out of brokenness that adoption even happens. And Mother's Day is a reminder of that all around. And so I'm so excited that Birth Mother's Day exists and that they're right there together, that Birth Mother's Day is the day before. And so you're celebrating that brokenness in, I think, the best possible way. Instead of just saying like, oh, that didn't happen, we're here to celebrate me today. That everyone wins there,
Yeah, absolutely. Motherhood is amazing, and we should be celebrating and supporting each other always.
Yeah. Oh, amen, sister. So, okay. So where can we find your book? I'm so excited to be able to share this part of the interview because it's awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. You can find my book on my website, which is authorcbauer.com. You can purchase it there and find out other information. It's also available on Amazon and some select stores in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area.
Hopefully more to come.
Yes, hopefully more to come. Absolutely. I'm working on it.
That is so cool. Well, yeah, I'm glad to know that your author page, because I've been plugging the Amazon page. But if you've read it, if you're one of the people that have listened and read the book, please leave a review on Amazon, because that's going to help get this book into more hands, which is so important. And Christine, where can we find you other than your book, on social media or blog or wherever?
Yeah, I am on Twitter at author C. Bauer. And I am on Facebook. I have an author page on Facebook, although I think I'm going to just combine that with my regular Facebook page, because there's no separation. It's my life. Well, my book and my life are all like the same.
And the algorithm Nazis are keeping people from seeing your stuff that way. Okay, cool.
So, I would love to have people follow and friend me, and I am all about supporting moms of all kinds. And again, like it's a huge job, and we need to support each other. And yeah, it's as you know, it's the best job, but the most difficult job. So we need to lift each other up.
Yes. And if you are an adoptive mom out there listening, or a birth mom, I hope that you're inspired by Christine's story, that Katie had so many parents that surrounded her and loved her throughout her life. And that can be your story too. That the stigma can end today. And it's people like Christine who are helping further that initiative. And so thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for gifting the world with this book. And I don't know, thanks for sharing it. I feel so honored that this is your first podcast and that you've used this platform to share your stuff. I think it's such an honor. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. It was a pleasure, and keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you for listening to the Adoptive Mom Podcast. I know this stuff is hard, and I hope you found encouragement here. Remember, you are enough, and you're doing a great job. God wants to be at the center of this journey, and He is big enough to redeem all of our mistakes. Don't forget to check out show notes and other resources at theadoptivemompodcast.com. Thanks again for listening.